1971. It was 1971.
The year is 1971. It's a 20th century year long thought to have been lost, but recently rediscovered. And 1971 would go down as the first in a wild string of 10 consecutive years that would be remembered as the 70s. As with most years in this singular decade, 1971 begins with January, when the new radio and television ban on cigarette ads went into effect. Undaunted, Madison Avenue shifted focus from cigarettes to other products designed to lead newly liberated women to their graves.
They named it Rely.
January 25th. After living as a celebrated god in the 1960s, the new decade begins as something of a bummer for one Charles Manson, who along with 3 of his many women followers is convicted in the gruesome killings of a few Hollywood types and a grocer. As a sign of the changing times, the nation struggles to make sense of why and how a filthy homeless man of 5 foot 2 inches tall could pull so many hot young hippie chicks. That's how good it was for white guys in the 1960s. January 26th, relieved Beach Boy Dennis Wilson breathes a sigh of relief and gets his first decent night's sleep since he passed out on his boat the night before.
I got blisters on my fingers.
February 9th, 1971. Satchel Paige is the first Negro League player to be elected to the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. In 1948, Leroy Robert Page, known on the street as Satchel, found himself a DEI hire for the Cleveland Indians in the real baseball league. In a lowering of standards curiously never extended to any white player before or since, he was welcomed as a rookie at the unprecedented age of 42. In fact, he may have been older. His own mother apparently claimed he was at least 2 years older, and Page himself had a history of misrepresenting his age. The reparations would continue to flow his way, with Page still granted a slot on a major league roster when he was 59 years old. Or was he? Thankfully, with Satchel Paige and this dark corner of our shameful past behind us, today's MLB recruits solely on the basis of talent.
1971.
February 28th. In Ontario, California, a new world record is set by daredevil extraordinaire, Evel Knievel. From upon his trusty mechanical steed, Evel, whose real name is the decidedly much less evil Robert, successfully jumps a heroic 19 cars, demolishing the old record of, I'm guessing, 18 cars? Around the country, there is jubilation as boys everywhere commemorate Knievel's monumental achievement, with visits to emergency rooms and oral surgeons across this great land.
We have very little choice about our life. The only thing really left us is a choice about our death. And mine will be glorious.
March 16th. On the night the leprechauns come, artists hope to get lucky at the Grammys in the days when giants walked the earth. Mostly. And if you hooked up with a guy, it was to write songs, mostly. Barely months after the Simon and Garfunkel split and the Beatles' bitter breakup, on this night, the Stars and One White Dwarf would align to reunite old partners. With the Beatles also up for an award, many wondered if on this night John Lennon might encounter his favorite partner, heroin. I'd have bet yes. Yes, by 1971, it's clear music is changing. Growing up, developing a moral conscience, as reflected by this early foray into the preachy, long-winded acceptance speech.
Thank you. Good night.
Ugh. Insufferable. And finally, after nearly 2 decades, blues legend and black person B.B. King wins his first ever Grammy for The Thrill Is Gone. Sadly, within hours, his Grammy was gone. King was swindled out of his trophy by a white man offering a whiskey flask. Later, when B.B. told his woman, they got to fussing, and she treated him real mean.
1971.
April 5th, Lieutenant William Calley is sentenced for his role in the My Lai massacre in which U.S. troops murdered 22 unarmed South Vietnamese civilians. Justice came down hard, with Calley receiving a harsh sentence of life in prison, which the Court of Military Appeals later reduced to 20 years in prison, which is still a lot. though the Secretary of the Army reduced it to 10 years, which is nothing to sneeze at, even if he was paroled by President Nixon after serving only 3 years. That comes out to about 50 days of prison per person killed. 22 of the estimated 504 unalived in My Lai. May 30th, at a Grateful Dead concert in San Francisco, 30 members of the crowd are hospitalized after drinking apple cider spiked with LSD. Attendees first suspected they'd been dosed with a powerful, mind-altering substance when the music began to sound strange, describing it as in tune, tight, and not at all listless or limp. Some of those unwittingly sent on this bad trip reported a desire to bathe and get a job at my dad's appliance store. Unfortunately, about 12 hours later, those effects wore off. Boston street punk, gay icon, and occasional action hero Marky Mark Wahlberg is born June 5th, 1971. Born doomed. Doomed to a timeline that, by his own admission, left him tragically unable to prevent terrorists from taking over a flight from Boston to LA that he was scheduled to be on nearly 30 years later to the day. One can only wonder, had Marky Mark been born June 4th or even June 6th onto an alternate timeline that put him on that flight, just how differently things might have ended. I imagine he probably would have been recognized by the terrorists as the Funky Bunch guy, then held by two of them while a third gleefully slices Marky's face to the horror of his onlooking friends. Until... and maybe a posthumous Oscar for Planet of the Apes. I don't know, I didn't see it. July 12th, 1971. Homosexual serial killer Juan Corona is indicted for committing at least 25 murders in and around the Sutter County region of California. Corona made the illegal trek into the Golden State 20 years earlier and soon found work picking produce. But it seems any fruit Juan picked ended up bruised, stabbed and slashed with his machete, then hastily buried in a pre-dug hole in the orchard where he worked. Like so many homosexual predators, Corona had a type: middle-aged drifter white guys that he would sex up, then discard. So Juan Corona stands as an early example of an immigrant who achieved success and fame doing the kinds of things most Americans don't want to do. August 9th, Operation Demetrius. British security forces arrest 337 Northern Irish nationalists on suspicion of affiliation with the Irish Republican Army, detaining them in Long Kesh prison without trial. Downing Street defends the action, saying the only way to be certain a man is actually in the IRA is when he accidentally blows himself up in a failed bombing attempt. September 18th, 1971. The first cup noodle is brought to market, providing fast, easy food on the go for divorced dads rushing out the door to get to family court. It's the dawn of newly single men in their 40s eating out of vending machines, and Momofuku Ando, in, you guessed it, Japan. Well, this bad Momofuku conjures a nearly tasty noodle that any man can prepare in minutes, while he conveniently blasts millions of his own noodles with the same high-energy microwave radiation that freed his former wife from her kitchen drudgery with half his assets. Packed with more disodium inosinate than garlic powder, when mixed with scalding water, this toxic brew of chemicals and molten styrene nanoparticles is eagerly slurped down by men the world over to hasten a release from their earthly torment. A single dad death sentence in a single-use cup. And good news, single moms, kids like it too. You're welcome, ladies. Hey. September 29th. As many as 10,000 people are killed when a cyclone and tidal waves slam into the Bay of Bengal. The world watches helpless, knowing that with so many people dead, the region's tigers and cobras will have no food supply. But after a visit from Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, within 48 hours, heroic Indians rally to produce 10,000 babies to feed to local tigers and cobras. October 10th. The former London Bridge is reopened in Lake Havasu City, Arizona. The 19th century stone-arched bridge was transported in pieces from England by American entrepreneur Robert McCulloch as a way to attract potential real estate buyers who might otherwise not want to live where temperatures can reach 128 degrees. With the London Bridge, the man-made lake is now a successful tourist attraction, with Lake Havasu a leader in its number of annual spring breakers and unprocessed rape kits.
Looking like a record cover from 1971.
December 4th, 1971. They all came out to Montreux on the Lake Geneva shoreline to make records with a mobile. They didn't have much time. Frank Zappa and the Mothers were at the best place around, but some stupid with a flare gun burned the place to the ground. They burned down the gambling house. It died with an awful sound. Luckily, Funky Claude was running in and out pulling kids out the ground. When it all was over, they had to find another place. Swiss time was running out. It seemed that they would lose the race. They ended up at the Grand Hotel. It was empty, cold, and bare, but with the Rolling Truck Stones thing just outside, making their music there. With a few red lights and a few old beds, they made a place to sweat. No matter what they get out of this, I know I'll never forget. December 25th. The worst hotel fire in history happens at the Taeyongak Hotel in Seoul, South Korea, resulting in the tragic death of 163 people and a truly tragic, terrible song. This concludes our look at a year that marked the launch of FedEx, Starbucks, and Willy Wonka, when we would see the voting age lowered to 18, Dwayne Allman eat a truckload of peaches, and Jim Morrison leap from a plane with a satchel full of money disguised as D.B. Cooper. A year of which historians might look back and say, 1971, that was a year that is. All right, for more talk and thoughts about this incredible year, check out the After Party. The link is right here. If you enjoyed the video, help me out and hit that like button. Let me know in the comments what year you'd like me to do next.